Good vibes, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on Search and Destroy, our ESPN Esports Call of Duty League program. You're watching us on Twitch, the ESPN app, YouTube, and on Twitter. Arda and Emily with you for the next hour or so, breaking down all things Call of Duty League. And we have a brand new tournament champion to add to the list, Emily.
Ooh.
Finally, the list grows from 4 to 5. Step aside, or at least make some room, Chicago, Dallas, Atlanta, and Florida. For now, the Big Apple. New York City, finally on the board with the tournament win in their own home. In their own home.
In their own home. Yeah, their home.
Well, I guess in a way it does make sense.
It's cool, though, because, I mean, the only other team, and I think we may have seen more of it if audiences had been in play, right? Because I think having a home crowd is actually really cool and can influence players positively. But the only other one we've seen is in Atlanta, which... was back in the days when we actually had live events. So it was really cool to see New York win, not just because it was their home series, but because like how many weeks have people been talking about how dangerous New York is in scrims? Like since Mack joined the team, everyone's like, this team's super dangerous. Yep. I don't want to face them. They're really formidable. And then they could never get over that hump on stage. I keep saying, I don't want to have to keep bracketing stage, so just assume I'm talking about online events, okay? And I don't want to keep putting stage in air quotes. But they finally did it, and they did it in a really convincing manner by the end of the bracket. So that was really cool.
We will break that down throughout the show. The first thing we want to mention is we now know when Champs is going to happen. Previously, it was announced that it would be entirely online. Probably no surprise there for anyone watching the show. But playoffs will start on August 19th and run through August 23rd. Championship weekend will be August 29th and August 30th. Remember, we're not going to go through the entire format right now, but just remember that every single team does make the postseason, but where their seeding stands at the end of the season in terms of the standings matters the most on where they begin their postseason journey. Let's ask this question, Emily. If the playoffs started today, right?
Oh, man.
We would have a very interesting layout because as much as it's funny to look at the standings now, right? Like you look at the standings and you still have the top 4 teams that you would, the 3 teams that we have been talking about all season, Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, they're still in the top 4. Then you have Florida and New York. Those are the best of the rest since the online move. Now they're finally in the top 5. You still have Minnesota knocking on the door at 6th, even though they've regressed a little bit. But this seems, I don't know, when I look at it, it seems apropos based on what we've seen this season. But also, I don't know if I would put, I wouldn't order them like this in terms of who I would pick to win in the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, FaZe have looked pretty shaky. I don't know if that's because something I actually really should have asked Easy Mack last week, and if we have him back on the show ever, I'll bug him about it again. I don't know if he can answer this, but we see this from a lot of teams once they're pretty much qualified for a top 2 finish, right? Because that's what FaZe need to get, and they're pretty much locked in mathematically. So I do wonder if a little bit of like, not like lethargy, but just, kind of, you start experimenting a bit, you might start limit testing a bit. They haven't looked as coordinated, I guess. And I think a lot of their actual like map movements are being exposed now if they can't win their gunfights. So it's like, I don't think FaZe should ever be counted out just because of the talent on the roster. And we have seen them have an ability to have really strong like S&D, right? Really strong approaches to respawn maps. But right now, would they be your pick to win? I don't know. They've looked shaky even with making the finals in the past 2 events before they were eliminated in semifinals at this event.
I and I've said this previously on this show. I have no qualms about saying that Florida is my pick today to win champs. Today, based on everything that's happened recently. Yeah, recency bias, but of course we have to have recency bias because everything changes every week in Call of Duty League anyway. The way the tournament, like, look at this past weekend. Everything was different this tournament. Mack Meltz was on an AR, and they still won a tournament weekend. Like, there's so much to unpack, and we will get to that. But, like, to me, Florida is my favorite to win champs, but the team that has given them the most problems have been New York. New York had a unfortunate 3-2 final map kind of deal against Florida, but then they 3-0'd them recently as well. So, like, there is a precedent set there to me that those two teams, at this point, you may even not only include them in the conversation with the big three, but some people might even exceed the big three with those two picks.
Yeah, it's weird to say that my favorite pick of the quote-unquote big three, even though we haven't seen them in a week since we had the meta shift and now we're back, ? Again, we're going to talk about that. But are the Empire, like, I still think they've looked pretty good on in online play. Not a meme, like, honestly. I really liked how they were playing previously despite their losses. So I don't know. I look at this and I'm like, they're the team of, like, the top three, right? That I really, really don't want to count out, because I think I have a feeling that they're going to show up for championship weekend. And I really like the way their roster has been built. Like, I just really like their roster. I like the combination of, like, veterans and rookies and how they've really leveraged that across the season. So.
And speaking of veterans, of course, they have someone leading them who has been in the COD scene for a very long time in Rambo Ray. We had him on Coach's Corner. You can watch that in VOD on our YouTube channel /ESPN Esports. And he noticed a lot. He noticed, obviously, more assault rifles being used, more ARs being used, the M4 being used to success by Mack Meltz in particular. We can actually get into this discussion right now, just talking about what we noticed. I will point out to the viewers out there that you have something behind you. I do. You actually, I believe you got the answer today, did you not?
I received the answer yesterday when I talked to Skrapz and Wuskin based on what they had seen and also some of the things that have been floating around the community. But yes, as of right now, apparently the 10mm attachment is not GA'd after being not GA'd for most of the season and being GA'd recently, and then now is no longer GA'd. So
that full interview's already been posted. You can check it out on our YouTube channel as well /ESPN Esports. And I will say I'm surprised, or pleasantly surprised, I should say, that they were talking about it, because I have a feeling that we are back in that mode where GAs are back under the carpet. I'm just going to say that. I have a hunch that the openness of GA discussion is going to be a rarity once again.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean,
I have a feeling. I have a feeling.
I don't know about on broadcast, but, like, players are totally open to talking about it. Like, and they kind of were before, but now, like, everyone is just kind of like, whatever. Like, everyone knows about this anyway. I'm going to be, let's just say that I'm going to be paying attention to Twitter and paying attention to interviews with COD players and personnel moving forward to see how much of this is discussed. With that said, we did see, like you said, certain things being GA'd and not GA'd. And what we saw this past weekend, of course, was a little bit less SMG use. Not as much as we thought, though. A little bit more AR use with the M4 getting a spotlight. So what you noticed this weekend, obviously this played into NYSL's favor, but which teams would you say benefited from this? Which teams did you see struggle from this? Let's just have this meta conversation and what you saw. I mean, I think Chicago was definitely ready for this, considering that, like, we talked about this in the beginning of the year, right? That coming from Black Ops 4, most teams were designed around AR players. And, like, an AR meta is not weird. Like, an SMG meta is actually a lot more rare. I believe someone was saying the last one we saw that was this, like, SMG focused, I believe, was Ghosts. And maybe someone in the chat can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I'm like 90% sure. And I think the Huntsmen did benefit from this. Even with, adding Pristini in, who has kind of been like flexing, but also I guess it's more on the SMG. Like I think Chicago looked really good in this. I think the big thing for me is everyone was waiting for that first phase game to see if they were going to use the AUG, right? Because I think that was the big thing. Like if that GA had been broken in this tournament, then like everything would have just come like crashing down, right? Like, and I kind of wanted to see it just to see the chaos, but also we ended up having a really good tournament with a lot of teams with some of these strong AR players, showing up and doing really well. So like I think the Huntsmen are actually an example of a team that despite their relative success across multiple events have had several role swaps because they haven't necessarily always felt comfortable in Modern Warfare. So I was happy to see them perform well. I was happy to see New York perform well. I mean, even before this happened, people were saying that they were roasting people in scrims. So I'm not even going to necessarily attribute that to the meta shift, but they looked really comfortable. Ultra looked more comfortable. I don't think you necessarily say like it's definitely the reason why they made top 4, but I think that they did look more comfortable on it, and I think it did help them. Although, another thing is just like Cammy and Classic were just absolutely insane.
And let me be clear. I know that I'm a big Toronto fanboy on this show, okay? But even I'm surprised that they got through the Atlanta phase. Okay? Like, I want to be very, very, very clear on this. I'm proud. I'm happy. Good for my Toronto boys. But I did not see that coming. And I don't think many people saw that coming, despite Toronto's recent success. That is a big feather in their cap. Absolutely. And a big feather in New York's cap. A team that wished they would have had a better result in this weekend were the London Royal Ravens. I think that they now move into that spot of, okay, we want to see more from this team, or they are a team that we are looking at as one that should make a final or another final and possibly a tournament weekend win. They are hosting a upcoming tournament event. In fact, the next one this weekend, we'll talk about that in a bit. But you had a chance to speak with Skrapz and Wuskins, the twins, and they discussed the meta that we saw this past weekend as part of the full interview that Emily did, which is now available on YouTube. Here's a clip.
The 10mm is back. Yes?
Yeah. 10mm is back.
What is, as much as you can say, what does that mean for this weekend?
Basically, it just means that the attachment that was GA'd before the last event is un-GA'd now. Not much of a big... there is a bit of a difference. I wouldn't say it's drastically changing, but obviously it's been un-GA'd, it's back in. You're gonna see a lot of people using it. So yeah, it's exciting.
Are we going back to MP5 meta then?
To be honest, I couldn't tell you that yet. Obviously, we've only had one day of practice since that was un-GA'd, so maybe I'll be able to give you more answers by the end of the day. We have 3 sets today, so I'll be able to give you more answers by the end of the day for sure.
We are back playing with a damage attachment, but that's fine. We'll get on with it. We'll act like it's normal.
Well, it wasn't GA'd, and then it was after the nerf.
It wasn't GA'd for some bizarre reason, and then it got GA'd, and now we're back on GA'd. I don't know how.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah, just making sure I have the timeline right. How difficult is it to adjust that rapidly over a short time period?
It all depends on like what actually happens. If there's a drastic change, if somebody finds something else that's broken and then that's in the meta and like you've got to use that, then it's not that much of a big difference. But I think for the last like 2-3 months, that's all I've been dealing with. Like I said to you a moment ago, like going into the event last weekend, 2 days before it, I started using the M4. I had to get used to that because it went to a 3 AR meta, and obviously that gun's pretty OP. But no excuses. That's just a part of the cycle, I guess, and it's just my job, so I can't complain.
So as I mentioned, that full interview is available at youtube.com/ESPN Esports. One thing I noticed, Emily, from the Subliners, other than the fact that they just absolutely dominated their semifinal and final performances, was they played domination on Hackney Yard the entire tournament. Every single domination they played was on Hackney Yard, and they were excellent on Hackney Yard. And I asked a few people in the Subliners why that happened. Was that just lucky? Did other teams not ban? Did they know? Like, what was the reasoning? And the Subliners, many people in the, when I say many, a couple, I shouldn't be like, I didn't talk to everybody. I talked to a couple people. But they said that they were very pleased with that, and they had been getting really good scrim results on Hackney Yard across the board, not just Dom. So they were very comfortable on Hackney, and in particular with this new meta, they were enjoying the fact that they were getting to play on Hackney a lot more, and they just didn't see other teams veto that, particularly in Dom. So I don't know if that is a leading reason for them to win this series, but that was definitely something I noticed.
I mean, I'm kind of like, it was one of the more popular Dom maps, right? Until it kind of started getting vetoed a bit more. But like, I feel like if you, and again, I don't have the statistics on this. I'm actually just looking through like the map recap that I did. I'm pretty sure it was like the most picked Dom map this weekend, partially because of the Subliners, but also I think it's been the most picked Dom map of the entire season. Just like Gunrunner is the most picked map for literally everything because it's the most even. Like, it's kind of the only fair map. But I think at least Hackney has like a really set kind of like strong side and weak side that are a bit more even, and B, like you'll get even chances on it, if that makes sense. Sure. So it's a little bit more, I would imagine that it's a little bit easier to practice for, which is probably why people ban it, right? Because even if you know that a map is like more even, you can ban it out and try for a map that you think you're better on, even if it's like not as quote unquote fair of a map. Especially in something kind of weird like domination, where you're really typically fighting a lot over the B flag for like full map control. So, but yeah, I mean, that's good that they recognized it, and more teams will probably be banning it against them coming up at future events.
Very likely. One person who was played coy a little bit when I asked him about it was Mack Meltz. I talked to him today, and totally fair game. I asked him to expand as much as he wanted to, and he didn't want to expand on that particular point about Hackney on domination. But he did talk about his team's success in their own home series this past weekend. Here's the clip. So the Subliners finally, it feels like it was about time. It feels like we were waiting for this a very long time, and finally the Subliners win a home series, and it's their own home series that they were hosting at that. Just take us through the final moments after you guys won the series. What were the conversations like among the team, and how does it feel?
It's definitely a really great feeling, especially since it's our own home series. And at the past tournaments, we've just been coming up short, just falling by like a few of our own mistakes, and just like so close to getting into a finals and potentially taking it home. So it's definitely like a sigh of relief after the tournament, just laughing together, like finally it all clicked, and yeah, just happy we won.
So let's go through some of the matches. I mean, it was very emphatic, especially late in the tournament. On Sunday, you guys absolutely rolled through the competition, including against the Huntsmen and the Ultra, who themselves have had a lot of clout on them lately with some impressive results. What do you think led to those 3-0 wins against the Ultra and the Huntsmen in particular?
I don't know. We just kind of came out hot. And when a team comes out hot, like, it's kind of hard to stop them. We just everything just felt in our control throughout all the maps, all the series on that Sunday. So yeah, we just all felt good. We're all on the same page. Everything was clicking.
Is there something about, I was looking at the maps in particular that you guys played on. Every single domination you played on this weekend was on Hackney. Was there a reason for that? Was there a strategy for that? Were you guys scrimming well on it, or is that just how it happened?
It's just kind of how it happened. Like, one team vetoes, we veto a map, and another team vetoes a map, and it just so happened to be a Hackney Dom.
Is that one that you guys are particularly good at, that you guys feel comfortable on?
Yeah, we're all fans of that map. Try not to,
Okay, so you're not going to tell me more. That's fine. What about the meta? What about, like, obviously there was a big patch that just dropped. How did the game feel from your perspective and your team's perspective this weekend?
The meta, it kind of favored us. People weren't expecting me to run an M4, obviously because Donnie and Attach both have ran that role previously. But from my perspective, it was great. I loved the role I had. The game felt really easy, and yeah, it was kind of just smooth sailing throughout the tournament.
Another interesting thing that Mack mentioned in this interview, which will be posted in full after the show at youtube.com/ESPN Esports, is back in March when he was grinding it out looking for a CDL team, the Subliners approached him and he was actually very surprised. He actually got offers from 2 different teams and he chose the Subliners because he felt like he would gel better with the players on that team. So Emily, I guess he made the right decision.
He was right. Yeah, he was right. Because and I don't think Mack transformed the team, but just having that another player that just fit them super well. We kind of saw the same thing with the Mutineers, first with Pharaoh and then with Awakening, in terms of how that team really found the way that they wanted to play. I think Mack coming on just really cemented this team as a unit that was going to play together a lot better. Because previously it wasn't the most frustrating thing about New York, and I know we say this about a lot of teams, it was specifically about New York and LA Optic, was that they had so much talent to be looking as poor and as lost as they did in competitive. So the fact that he recognized that is really good. And now, the Subliners have been a team that other teams have been saying is really threatening for a while, and they finally proved it this past weekend.
If you look at the trajectory of the Subliners and their results and the perception of this team since Mack Meltz joined the squad, it would be like a stock you would be proud to own, right? It's like a jagged upward trajectory line culminating in this epic sale of your stock at triple the value or whatever. In this case,
because
the tournament
it plummeted
victory.
At first, right? Because
right.
we were oh yeah, they're gonna be a good team, and then after the first few events, and then
if you bought Subliner stocks right before March, you are laughing right now. But what was it about each step of the way? It didn't come immediately. He joined in March. Several months later, they finally win a tournament. So what for them to break through after positive results now, what do you attribute that to the most?
I think just improvement over time, possibly the slight meta shift, since they obviously caught on to it really quickly and it favored them. But then also I always hate to bring up the scrims to stage thing, because I hate when a team gets that narrative. But if any team had that narrative, it was the Subliners. I cannot stress enough how many players and coaching staffs were who are you afraid of in this tournament? Subliners, because they've been killing us in scrims. Okay, we're not seeing it on stage, but I don't think they're wrong, So I think that was the big, and I'll talk about this later when we talk about the Subliners' chances to win another event coming up. I think that now they have that kind of off of their back, I think you'll see them to continue to perform really, really well on stage. And it's not like they were performing badly. They were just performing just before they could reach a finals, right? They were a semifinals team.
Well, it paid off. And we got a lot this weekend. Other than the Subliners, we saw them sweep the Huntsmen. The Huntsmen had a really weird tournament. I don't know how else to describe it other than this. They beat the Subliners, right?
Mm-hmm.
They beat them 3-2. Then they sweep the Atlanta FaZe in the matchup that everybody finally got to see. It was almost anticlimactic in a sense.
It was very anticlimactic. Come on. You get up and you're yeah, this is going to be great. It's the first series of the day. I've been looking forward to this so much. And then it's a 3-0.
I guess every matchup in the semifinal and final was a 3-0.
This is true. We had a 3-0 Sunday.
It was a 3-0 Sunday. We had 9 games. That's it. But Chicago is on the receiving end of a sweep in the final. So it's almost it's just weird. I don't even know how to describe it. You're impressed by the performance, but at the same time, you're like, how do you go from 3-0ing the Atlanta FaZe to getting 3-0'd by the Subliners? It's such a 180 from the semifinals to the finals in a way.
Well, I mean, I think the big thing is like when they faced each other first, right? It's not like it was a Huntsman stomp. It was 3-2 in favor of the Huntsmen, and they basically won it on S&D. So really all the Subliners had to do was, like arguably win on S&D, because I think they'd already beaten them in Respawn. So, I think the big thing was that when it came down to that first Ramaza search and destroy against the two of them, like Zuma, who I think the other cool thing about New York is that a variety of their players stepped up at different times. Like Zuma wasn't insane all weekend, but he stepped up in this final series and arguably like all day Sunday. And, he helped take control of that S&D on Ramaza, even with Pristini and Arceus playing really well. So, I mean, I think if there's an adjustment that they made, it might have been that. But then I think we already saw that they kind of had the Huntsmen beat already on Respawn. So
that was their only domination loss of the entire weekend as well. The Subliners, I mean, against the Huntsmen in that 3-2 matchup. They won every other domination, as we mentioned, on Hackney every single time this weekend. Another team that impressed was the Toronto Ultra. And Emily, I never, ever get to ask you, sing the praises of my team, because we haven't had many opportunities to do that other than to say, oh, yeah, they looked okay. But now they made a semifinal, so I feel very confident in asking this question. What has been the cause of the Ultra's recent success, Emily Rand?
I mean, I think they're finally, hopefully they decide on their roster, right? Because the main reason why it was so hard to talk about Toronto was that they kept swapping pieces and players, and they didn't really seem to, they were still figuring things out in terms of who they wanted to put in the game, never mind how they were going to play. But as much as I was a bit worried about Kleenex joining the starting lineup, not because he wasn't impressive last year in Black Ops 3, but the last I'd heard is that he was kind of struggling in Modern Warfare. But he performed really well for the team. Cammy and Classic, but especially Cammy was insane. And I think that's kind of what they needed. Not that they need one carry player, but they needed people popping off at different times. And that's what they lacked previously, I think, even with some of the KD numbers. It didn't somehow translate into wins. Now it's actually translating into wins with this roster. And that's the biggest difference to me. I really like this lineup, actually. They're really fun to watch.
Yeah, it took them a while. At first, we were saying that this would actually be really good for them because they can scrim internally and they can mix and match. But that wasn't the case, at least on LAN. And then once they made more concrete decisions, I guess maybe in the long term you would see that as a success. Is it too little, too late, given the standings? Because the one thing is that it's cool to see these teams emerge, right? But the Toronto Ultra are still 10th in the standings. So it's going to be very difficult for them to get out of that. Even what you were saying about the top 4 being established, well, the Subliners are at 130 right now. They just won a tournament weekend. There's no way they can catch the Dallas Empire. They have one more tournament left. Even if they get 50 CDL points, they're still in 5th. So it's going to be as great a story as it is for Toronto that they came alive in the second half. The way that that champs and the postseason is structured, it's still going to be very difficult for them and other teams in the bottom half.
Yeah. I mean, I think the big thing with Toronto is that they really need to, I guess, try to push up to the middle of the bracket, right? Sneak into that 8th place spot. Maybe Optic doesn't do as well this next weekend, and then Toronto does really well in their home event. But I think that would be the play for them right now.
Yeah.
That And obviously, like, part of that is not even under their purview. Like, even if they perform super well, some of that also probably relies on other teams faltering that are in those spots. So it's tough. Like, if I'm them at this point, just based on the way champs is structured, I'm trying to get into that like 5th or 8th place bracket and see if I can't knock someone out of that spot or out of those spots.
Well, there are 2 more chances to do that. Toronto, as we mentioned, will actually be hosting the last home series of the season. That will be July 24th to 26th. That is 2 weekends from now. But this upcoming weekend will be the London Royal Ravens home series, July 17th to 19th. The Royal Ravens hosting their 2nd home series. And you had a chance to speak with Wuskin and Skrapz. We saw a clip earlier. But now we're going to hear them talk about this upcoming weekend's event. Have a look.
How do you both feel like the team has performed over your past few events?
Do you want me to talk on this, Bradley, or do you want to do it?
Go on, you can.
I mean, obviously, it hasn't been what we wanted. It hasn't been what we obviously aimed for. We've had a few ups and downs. As obviously, we're not gonna sugarcoat that. But I mean, going into this last event, I'm pretty sure we had like 2-3 different meta changes. That's obviously not an excuse. I know Dylan leading into that event, he was just like he'd not even used the gun he was using at the event for like no longer than a day. I'd been using the M4 for like 2 days, but it's pretty much just all over the place. We hadn't even practiced domination. Like, there was just so much going on leading up, like the week leading up to this event, and if anything, it probably hindered us like everybody else. It's not an excuse again, but it did come into play, and it didn't help out whatsoever. But that's just a part of the game, and we've just got to accept that, and we've just got to try and get better, I guess. And the next event, and obviously champs after that, focus up on winning, obviously, and what we want.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have a meta discussion in a bit, especially with other things that happened this past week. But where I see you guys is like there's, I guess, the kind of cluster of top teams, and then you guys are like right underneath trying to break through.
For sure.
So what do you think it's gonna take? Because like you're right there, and
I don't know.
It's so close.
Yeah, like we finished the other day, and one of the coaches said to us, I'm pretty sure we played like 22 games, and I'm pretty sure 10 of the losses, we played 22 games this season, and 10 of the losses are versus the top 3 teams. It's like, we just can't break past the top 3, like top 4 teams. We just can't beat them. I don't know what it is, like he said. Obviously, we've got to find that out. We're just so close, this little edge, and hopefully we discover that before, obviously, the home series and champs, and we can get over that hurdle, for sure.
If each of you had to describe the London Royal Ravens season in a word thus far, what would it be?
I'd say if we were in the Premier League, I'd have to say we were the Tottenham Hotspur. We just choke every. I think every game we go into, like every tournament, like leading up to it, we look pretty insane, and then I don't know, the tournament starts, and it's just like everything just falls to pieces, and we just crumble. I'd say yeah, we're the Tottenham Hotspurs of the Call of Duty League.
Do you agree, Wuskin?
I'd just say it's very confusing. That's what I'm going to say. It's just one word, it's confusing. That's all I'm going to say.
But you're having like a career season, like statistically.
Ah, man, and here we are, confusing. You know, like, yeah. We're trying. We're getting there.
That adds to the confusion.
We don't
like
stop.
just like career statistical highs.
We don't stop, do we?
Nah, no chance.
We never stop.
All right, so let's break down the London Royal Ravens home series event. Who do we have playing in that series? Good question. Dallas, Paris, Seattle, London, LA Gorillas, Subliners, most recent champs, Florida, most recent champs as well, or more recent champs, and OGLA. So you can look at this and you can clearly define 4 teams that you would put in the upper bracket and 4 teams that you would put in a lower bracket. But do you see any, like, based on how the brackets actually shake down? So Group A is London, Seattle, Optic, Florida. Group B is Paris, Dallas, New York, LAG. Do you think this lends itself to any sort of surprises at all?
I mean, I think Group A could be probably more open than people might give it credit for. Like, I think most people will be looking at this and be like, Florida, London, definitely. That's also who I picked in my own bracket. Spoilers. But
Yeah.
I think that, like, the weirdest thing is that Seattle, I've been really harsh on them previously, but I don't think they're like pushovers either. Optic is weird. I don't know if you want to get into talking about them right now, but like I have no idea how they're going to perform, right? Because like previously, I would have said, okay, with the recent meta shift, with the recent GAs, you know, they designed this team around AR players. This could be really good for the roster they had. Now they're bringing in 2 new players, and
what do you make of that move? What do you make of that?
I mean, so like Hollow has performed really well in like they both performed well in challengers, right? Which is where they're both coming up from. The weird thing about Jaraza is that like people barely know anything about him because he hasn't really played previously. He's pretty much a rookie outside of this year. And like he apparently moved from Alaska to like the mainland US in Seattle just to be able to play in Modern Warfare. So I think that is a really interesting story. But I have no idea how he's going to perform like with the team. I feel like in these situations, we've actually seen a lot of like positive results happen from team changes like this. So I don't know what's going on with the team, but that's why it's so hard for me to pin down how Optic are even going to perform because I have no clue. And because I haven't seen them, I'm not rating them very highly. I don't know if that's fair or not, but like I feel like I can't really rate them because I wasn't like always impressed with Optic's previous performances, and now I don't know how this roster like works together. Although I know they did come out and say like we're really excited to see how they fit with the lineup. We think they're going to fit really well. We don't really know. So I'm like, I think they're actually the team I'm the most curious to see play just because I like feel like I know so little about them going into this event. But that's why like Group A is really interesting to me because there's Florida who have performed insanely well in stage events since the online, like outside of their own home series, right? And that was pre-Awakening days. You have London who are like, and I talked to Skrapz and Wuskin about it, but they're like right there, right? In a really frustrating way that we've talked about, you know, the Rocker when they were on LAN. We've talked about it previously with the Subliners. London are like on the cusp of really being a dangerous team. And it's been frustrating to watch them not be able to kind of break through whatever has been ailing this team, whether it be like, I do think they've had some kind of unlucky circumstances that were beyond their control, but they didn't at this last event, and they still didn't perform anywhere near as well as they wanted to, right? So I actually think Group A could be more open than people give it credit for. I think Group B is a little bit more set with both New York and Dallas, just generally being, in my opinion, like significantly better teams than Paris and Gorillas right now. Gorillas looked a little worse this past weekend, actually, than I thought they would. So that was kind of sad to see as well. Because I think they had been like really lights out on S&D, and they've been trying to improve Respawn, and I feel like they kind of took a step back this past weekend. So, and going up against New York again, who has just won the event. There's not a lot of time between that event and this one. Even though there might be a meta shift, I think they'll still be able to take momentum from winning that event, like I said previously. So yeah, I feel like that's a rough bracket for Paris and Gorillas to draw, just because I see Dallas and New York getting out of that pretty easily. But Group A is going to be, I'm still picking London and Florida, but Group A I think might be closer than people may expect. I don't know, because I have no idea what to expect out of Optic. That's really what it comes back to for me.
Yeah. I agree with you that the possibility is there. And really, we didn't have much to say about Awakening or Mack Melts when they joined their respective teams, and they have far exceeded any expectations placed upon them. So hopefully, at least if you're an Optic Gaming fan, the same is going to happen. What I like about Optic Gaming, if we're looking at it optimistically, is there are 4 teams that will be playing in both the London and Toronto home series. So they have the most opportunity to accumulate the most possible points going into the final standings. Those teams are Dallas and Florida, OGLA, and Seattle. So Seattle are the butt end of a joke at this point. They have 50 points at the bottom of the standings. But with that said, there's only 20 points separating 8th and 12th. So you either have 70 points or 50 points between 8th and 12th, and OGLA are included in that. However, 6th place is 120 points. That's one tournament win away, right? And the Subliners are 130 points. So all those teams that I mentioned, London, Minnesota, New York, those teams only play once. So if you're Optic Gaming and this pays off, you could conceivably, with 2 excellent performances, get into not only the top half of the standings, but possibly maybe in the top 5 if you get very lucky.
That would be really like
That's
getting out
but
of the middle
impossible.
section. Yeah, getting out of the middle section for champs would be like insanely difficult for them, especially with Dallas at this same tournament, and Florida for that matter at this same tournament. And you said Florida have to play twice as well, right? So
that's going to be interesting, right? So Dallas and Florida are basically 10 points apart right now. Florida's in 3rd with 200. Dallas is 4th with 190, and Atlanta leads the way with 250. So the 1, 2, 3, 4 can look dramatically different at the end of the Toronto home series, especially because Florida and Dallas have more points available to them participating in both.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool to see that in the final home event, you have Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, and Florida, who are right now the default top 4 all playing each other one last time, presumably, in Toronto. So, I mean, the unfortunate thing for Optic, if they do want to, like, miraculously break into that top 4 set, is that they would have to have one of Dallas or Florida just, like, fail tremendously, and I just don't see that happening with either of these teams. Like, I think Florida, maybe their luck or whatever runs out and they only get like semifinals, right? Like they get eliminated in semifinals. That still wouldn't be enough for Optic to overtake them to break into that like top 4 part. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe I've been wrong about all of the very risky things that you've put forward regarding roster changes or like standings. So, despite the fact that I'm saying no, Arda, that's definitely not going to happen. Maybe it will, because you have been right on some of these things. So,
well, that's probably the Optic Gaming being in 5th at the end of the season. It's not a prediction. It's more like I would say it's a very slim possibility. That's probably the most out there thing that I've said. That's even more out there.
Yeah,
that's very out there. But
what a great story that would be, though. Can I just say,
absolutely.
like, what an insanely interesting story that would be.
I mean, look, rookies and unknown commodities have been lights out for other teams and have turned their fortunes around. So who's to say it can't happen for Optic Gaming?
I will
it remains
say
to be seen.
This is kind of a tangent, but like one of the things that's impressed me the most about COD franchising, after seeing like franchising in other esports hit North America and have teams be like kind of stagnant and not take as many risks on young talent, is that like COD teams, I feel, have taken even more risks in bringing up rookies from challengers, or just bringing rookies onto their team that have performed insanely well. Like we've had way more success stories of rookie roster changes than we've had like failures. And that's been really awesome to see, actually. So I hope that is a trend that continues, because it's really cool to see so many of these people who may not have been given a chance without franchising for whatever reason in COD previously, getting a chance on some of these teams.
So let's predict, and let's predict then, end the show on this. What will happen this weekend? Let's continue that trend. Optic Gaming made some changes. They got some new faces on the roster. I'm going to ride the wave, Emily. I'm going to ride that wave. I'm going to say, you know what? My two teams to get out of Group A, Florida and Optic Gaming Los Angeles.
Wow.
With due respect to the Royal Ravens fans, particularly our superiors, I'm going to say that Optic Gaming, the gamble is going to pay off. Meanwhile, in Group B, I think that most people will look at Dallas and New York and say that's a lock. But in terms of a winner, that's going to be a tough one. Like I said, the Subliners have given Florida the toughest time recently. But the Mutineers overall, I'm feeling a Dallas-Florida final.
Wow.
I'm feeling a Dallas-Florida final. That's what I'm feeling. I'm going with that. What about you? Give me your predictions.
I picked New York to take it back-to-back, actually.
You do? Okay.
Because I don't think Florida wins, like, that would be 3 of 3, right, for their past events. That would be insane. And 4 titles total, like, since the online era. That would be nuts. I believe I had like, if I'm remembering my bracket properly, I should bring it up because I did one with the Call of Duty League, actually. I think I have New York, Florida final, and then New York winning. I could easily also see I don't think Dallas, New York final. It would depend. But anyway, I have New York repeating just because I think, again, I've said this several times throughout the show already, but I think they'll be able to carry the momentum from last week, despite a slight meta shift with the 10mm being back, probably. And
according to your whiteboard,
I never know. I know, right?
That will never lie. It never lies.
I think that New York, now that they have shed that kind of like, we're doing so well in scrims, why don't we do well on stage? Now that that's gone, I think you'll see them playing a lot more freely, a lot more confidently. I think they were really good on respawn maps. I think the place that they really needed to shore up was S&D, which I feel like we talked about this with a lot of teams. But I also think we saw improvements from them on that as well. So I don't know. I just have a feeling that New York goes back to back.
So those are our predictions. We will all be watching, of course, this weekend. We got 2 home series left. Next week on the show, we will talk about everything that happened in the London home series going into the Toronto home series, which will be the last one of the season before we get to the playoffs. And just to remind everybody, the playoff dates have been announced. Playoffs will begin on August 19th, run through August 23rd, and championship weekend, August 29th and August 30th, where millions of dollars will be on the line, and we will crown our first CDL Season 1 Tournament World Champion. So, very exciting, and we'll be here all along the way.
I was just going to say, I'm so glad that it's not just the 2 days, because I don't know if you saw they leaked it on the broadcast by accident, but it just said the 29th through 30th, I think. And everyone was like, wait, are we playing like 9 matches a day or something? Like,
round
what
the
is
clock,
going on?
24 hours. We're
24
just going.
24-hour COD.
With due respect to all the players, you got to stay awake for 48 hours straight, and champs will be played on 0 sleep. You'll be awake for 48 hours. Let's see how you perform.
That was very
They'll really complain about spawns.
I'm glad that did not happen.
But we'll be here all along the way. Don't forget, this show is also in podcast form. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can listen to us wherever you are. But if you're watching us on Twitch, the ESPN app, on Twitter, and on YouTube, we thank you very much. This is Search and Destroy. Emily and I bring you the best in Call of Duty League analysis every single week, and we'll do that next week. Take care.